Today on the podcast, I'm going to be sharing with you a recording of a conversation I recently had with Deb from Mama's Mission. Mama's Mission is an amazing podcast and resource for Christian mamas looking for encouragement and tips on how to navigate that great commission of discipling our children. We talked about her testimony, fertility struggles, how she was led to start the podcast in the first place, and tips for discipling your children. Check out the episode description for links to listen and connect with the Mama's Mission podcast. Trust me, you're going to want to do that. And here we go. Hey, you're listening to the Outside of Sunday podcast. Is your faith stuck on Sunday? Christianity was never meant to be constrained to a weekly church service. I'm Krista, and I'm here to help and encourage you to live your faith outside of Sunday. All right, so here I am today with Deb from Mama's Mission, and I'm so happy that you agreed to be on this podcast. I've been listening to it for a while now. I've probably listened to 4 or 5 episodes, and it has honestly blessed me so much just personally. And so I thought, what better way than just to tell other people about it, to tell my listeners about it, because it's a really beautiful podcast. The way that you talk to people and the way that you talk to your listeners is very patient, very loving, and yeah, I've just found it really helpful, and it's just blessed me so much. So before
It's awesome.
I just thought, because I don't know if anyone of my listeners know about you yet, and I want them to know. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what Mama's Mission is exactly, which is the name of your podcast, of course.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Deb, and I am a mum of 2. So I have a daughter who's 7 and a son who's 1.5. We were told that we wouldn't be able to have children, so they are definite miracles. I've been married for 15 years this year, had its ups and downs, but we're in a really good place at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a tiny house in Northland. So my house is
I was
9.
looking at it and I was like, is that a tiny house? I didn't want to say anything because I didn't know, but I love tiny houses and yours looks
Yeah.
gorgeous.
So those are the stairs right there. What else? I am a teacher by profession.
Wow.
So I still relieve here and there, because it's such a passion of mine. So I get to have the best of both worlds. I get to be at home with my son, but I also get to teach part-time as well. So I love that I do that. What else? Oh, Mama's Mission. Mama's Mission is my podcast, which I've been doing maybe about 2 years now. And it's where we talk about discipling our kids. And my heart is just to inspire and equip mamas to do the same thing. And from research that I've done, a lot of mamas need some help with consistency, because they've got the best intentions, but we all have the best intentions, but actually making it stick and those good habits stick is another thing entirely. So I help mamas in their journey to find some pockets of time in their day to actually disciple their kids in a really easy way, because I think a lot of people think that it's just this mammoth task let's just forget it. Like the church can worry about that. They'll do their thing. But it's actually not as complicated as what we may think. And so I'm here to help mamas just to make it easy for them.
Mm-hmm. I would describe your podcast, just as you're talking now, it just really, you're like a coach, honestly. You're like a coach, and it feels like you're just coming alongside the mum, which, when I'm listening, that's me. You're just kind of coming alongside, and no kind of judgments of where you might have been in the past in terms of discipleship, but just tips for where are you now? What can we do? Because sometimes I can get into like a guilt trip of, oh man, I've let this drop, and that doesn't help me. It discourages me. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Before we get into the moment that kind of launched the podcast, I'd really like to know a little bit about your faith journey. I think everybody's testimony is just an incredible thing, because that is the moment where you went from that kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. So I'd really love it if you would maybe share where you were first off in your life, when you first met Jesus.
Well, I have shared this before at church, and I think I titled it Boring but Blessed,
Mhm.
because I was blessed to grow up in a family that knew and loved Jesus. And the spiritual legacy it goes down the lines quite a long way on my mum's side in particular. So I've always had that. But you can't piggyback off your parents' faith, or you can for a certain amount of time, and then you actually have to make the call yourself.
Yeah.
So I was 13 when and it wasn't a huge event. I was just in my room one day and I was like, okay, well, what's it going to be? Let's
Mhm.
not fence it anymore. You're going to be on one side or the other. And I decided to follow Jesus. I gave my heart to him. And yeah, it's been a journey. So that was a lot. Oh, golly gosh, like over 20 years ago. Um, it's definitely been a journey of highs and lows, but yeah, and my faith has evolved where he's so much more a part of my day. Like at 13, I don't know how much you really know. And
Mm.
even in my 20s, I think I really developed a true intimacy with Christ in my early 30s
Mm.
when we were really struggling to conceive and I had no
Yeah.
option. We were even told IVF, don't even bother. It's just not going to happen.
Wow.
So to have no other option except my God, who said, well, I'm telling you differently. I'm
Mm.
telling you, you are going to be a mum. And he gave me a
Wow.
verse to stand on. And that's what I just kept holding on to, like clinging to him. And I
Mhm.
think that just grew us closer and closer. So
Yeah.
it was a sucky season for sure, but
That's sucky.
but it was definitely it's God knows, and he works all things for good, and he
Mhm.
definitely did that in that season.
Absolutely. I can definitely relate to that, just like clinging on to Jesus. I mean, in a different sort of season, but I remember, we just had a really hard 2 years in our marriage, and I was just like clinging on to Jesus. And, I think discipleship of our children is so important for those moments in their future, because
Yeah.
I think there's the potential, if we do just leave it up to the church to disciple our children, if we don't make it part of their Monday to Saturday, when those hard times come, there is the sad possibility that they won't actually turn to Jesus. What has your Christian walk looked like since you first met Jesus? What are some of the disciplines you have in your own life that have helped you in your faith journey?
Well, I used to be quite I would say, lukewarm Christian.
Mhm.
So I was quite content to sit there and be fed. I was serving quite a lot in my late teens,
Mhm.
but I didn't serve with the right attitude. I just served because there was a need there. And it was, I had some time on my hands, so why wouldn't I? But I did grow discontent in that. Fast forward a few years, and now I just start my day in the word always. I can hear from the Lord way more, because that was quite a foreign concept when I was walking with the Lord in the early stages. I just thought everyone else could hear from him, but not me.
Mhm.
And so I just really honed in on that discipline that he actually speaks to every single one of us.
Mhm.
I got into that through journaling, and I really unpacked how to hear from the Lord in journaling. And I kind of put my word to the side and felt that there was no value in the word, but that my mindset has completely shifted, because now I'm realizing that's everything.
Yeah.
And he will speak to me so clearly through his word as well.
Mhm.
And it guides me in my parenting, it guides me in my marriage, it guides me in all realms of life. And yeah, so that's the way it's totally evolved. So getting in my scriptures every day, journaling with the Lord, praying, that is something that I'm working on. But just praying when I'm hanging up the washing, when I'm going for a walk,
Mm.
choosing not to listen to the podcast all the time, or a podcast, because I do love podcasts.
Me too.
So choosing not to listen to that and just listening to my maker instead,
Mm.
and just actually paying attention. So yesterday I was walking, and I was like, man, you're amazing. Like, you created
Yeah.
trees. I love trees, but you didn't just create one type of leaf. You created like, there's probably millions of types of different leaves. Like, and every
Yeah.
tree has a purpose. Every animal, every insect, every human has a purpose. Like, my goodness, it just blows my mind about how creative our God is. And me personally, I'm going through a journey recently where I'm like, I'm not giving you the glory and the adoration that you are so entitled to, because yeah, and so that could be with our time, with what we're saying, all those kind of things. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment.
That's awesome. I can so relate. I feel like we've had very similar upbringings. That legacy thing, it's beautiful, like it, but it is
Yeah,
still like you do still have to choose it for yourself. And
yeah,
I used to journal so much, and just like you, I neglected the word, and I would just be like journaling these like heartfelt prayers to God and just be like pouring my little teenage heart out. Like, God, speak to me, God. And then I wasn't reading the word. So it's like,
yeah,
if his word is not in you, you know, eh, I don't think you should really expect, to be living in and constantly hearing from him. Or you could be hearing the wrong things and not
yeah,
actually identifying that, hey, that's not of the Lord.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Um, One of the clear and beautiful fruits of your faith in Jesus is the way that you point others to Christ, mainly with your Mama's Mission podcast. So I'd really love to know what the circumstances were that led you to first make that call and just to make that decision. I'm going to make a podcast and I'm going to point mums to, disciple their kids for Jesus. What was that?
Well, I think I had been hearing about calling, and we all have a certain purpose, and we all have a purpose, which is to glorify and honor God in everything that we do. So, as Christians, that's what we're here for. But I also believe that the Lord has placed a certain purpose in every individual. And I was kind of like, okay, well, what's mine? And I would love to say that He told me tomorrow, but it was a journey, and it's something I think it was almost like a test, like, how much do you want this? So
Mm,
I would keep pressing in, pressing in. And I was in the States one day visiting my sister, and I just felt I maybe it was the jet lag, I'm not sure,
mm.
but he got me up, quite late, and everyone was sleeping, so I went into the bathroom and I was like, "Right, we're gonna have it out." Like, we've done this before when I was told that we weren't gonna have children, and I was like, "I wanna hear from you one way or the other.
Mm,
Send me straight here, and I'll just, go with what you wanna do." And so I said the same thing. I got my Bible, I got my
mm.
journal, and I'm not leaving here until you give me what I'm wanting. And
Wow.
that's, I wanna hear what you've actually placed me here for. So he said, "All right, this is," we went through some scripture, and eventually he led me to a verse about discipleship. And I was like, "What?" At that stage, I only had my daughter who was 4. And I thought, what does that mean?
Mm,
And he just unpacked, and he said, "I really want you to show your daughter who I am, who Jesus is, and I want her to have a real authentic faith. I don't want her to come to her faith like you did in her 30s. I want this to be something she catches and runs with, so that she's not necessarily going to be a typical Christian where she gives her life to the Lord and then goes off the beaten track and then comes back. I want her to know and love me all the time." And I thought, okay, all right, I have no idea how I'm going to do that, but all right. And then he didn't just stop there. He was like, "Oh, and also you're going to lead other mums in how to do the same thing." And I was like,
so
okay,
cool.
great. Here I am, a mum of one child. So
Mhm.
I did not feel qualified at all. She was only 4. She is, still is a little firecracker,
Mhm.
keeps me on my toes. And I was like, I just feel like sometimes I feel like I'm just barely keeping my head above water. And you're telling me that you need to start teaching her about I need to start teaching her about God. And I was like, oh, this just feels massive. And he said to me, I've just given you the massive picture. I haven't given you everything in between. That's going to come. And so I thought, okay, well, what do? How do I start teaching other mums? And he was like, whoa, slow your roll. Like, you don't even know what you're doing yet. Like, so
Let's go.
I know. I was like, okay, I've got this plan. Let's go with it. And it's one of my biggest downfalls that he'll give me an idea and I just run with it. And then I've created all these plans and they all turn to custard because I've done it my way. And then he's kind of like, hey, I'm back here. Should we do it my way? Which we should have done in the first place anyway. So yeah, so that's what I did. And then he just took me on a journey and he was like, basically use your daughter as a guinea pig. Like, let's do things basic. Like, let's get in the word with her. Let's start talking about, like, he wanted me to just talk about him all the time, just naturally. And it's evolved over time. And yeah, so then eventually he was kind of like, okay, so you know how I told you I want you to talk to mums? Well, you can do that in your church, which you're already doing, but I'm thinking bigger here. And I was thinking, well, how can I do that? And at that time, I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and he was like, this is a good medium to do it. And so I thought, why not? I'll give it a crack. I didn't think that I was great at speaking. But that's just how it's gone. And it's, as I've done it, I've really started to fall in love with it and really enjoy it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it is. It's the new way to reach people, like on the internet, podcast, listening. There was a time where every village, every city had like a town square, and that's where you went to talk about these things. Or I suppose the church as well would be another place. But now it's all online, and we need to, obviously we're passionate about the same thing. We need to fill the airways. We need to fill the internet. We need to fill social media, YouTube with resources that are going to help build people's faith, help them with their discipling of their children, such important things, pointing people to Jesus in any way that we can, as much as we can. That's another reason why I was so glad that I found you, because I've honestly found it quite difficult to find New Zealand Christian podcasters. So your podcast is such a blessing, and I'm so glad that we have you on our team, for New Zealand, because there's so many like great American or UK podcasts, but it's like, come on, Kiwi girls, or Kiwi men, like this is not about just the ladies. So I think it's good. So what is one thing though that you would maybe, just for our listeners here who might be just starting out on this kind of discipleship journey, what is something that you would maybe tell yourself, if there were such a thing as time travel, as a brand new mama just starting to navigate parenting and discipleship? Because that was a huge change for me. I don't know if it was for you, but when you're first time mum, you've got this little baby and you're just focused on keeping it alive. Like that is your priority. I'm trying to keep this baby alive. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, parenting just like springs up out of nowhere. And you're like, I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt like, I don't really know what I'm doing with parenting. So I was like, resources. But what is something that you could tell yourself as a young mum just starting out this journey? What would you say?
Oh, that's really hard. I think for me as a mum, it really helped to have some routine. I think I'm just naturally a person of routine anyway. I guess I've had to conform to that in teaching. But yeah, I just had my routines and that kind of worked quite well. So I know there's a whole lot of hate on sleep schedules and things like that, but that just saved me, because when my daughter was, I don't know, 3-4 months old, she slept through the night just because.
What?
Yeah,
Amazing.
just because I just trained her, and it's not easy at times. And that didn't mean she slept through the night like consistently all the time. Most of the time she did, but she's just been, we've just had our routine. And yeah, I think also don't be so hard on yourself. Like we have these, I think we're our own worst enemies. We have these expectations, and sometimes we're looking at social media and you're just seeing the highlight rolls and also reels, and it's not realistic a lot of the
Yeah.
times. And that's why I really like watching people where they're just like, this is real, like this is how it's going down. And that's the reality, because we look at perfect homes, perfect devotions, perfect parenting, and it's like it doesn't exist. So, and I think also I would probably involve the Lord a whole lot more in the beginning stages of parenting, or even he was involved throughout conception as well, because I just knew that our babies were complete miracles, because our doctor said the only way I would have a child is with somebody else, because my husband's sperm count
Wow.
wasn't too great. So I knew they were miracles. So they were with us through he was with me through conception. But as I mentioned, major flaw, I kind of have my idea and I run with it, and then God's kind of like, "Hey, I've given you what you've asked for. Can I be involved in this?" And so it's like, oh, that's right, coming right back. So I'm constantly, it's like he's so patient.
Isn't he?
He could,
Yeah.
I'm always asking to be forgiven for the same thing. Like, I'm sorry for getting ahead of us. Like,
Mhm.
I suck. Like, I'm coming back to you. Like, let's do it your way.
Yeah. It's so true. Yes, God is so good, and it is his mercy and just his patience and his forgiveness is just so good. And you're so right, like parenting, it's not going to be perfect. I mean, even yesterday, I forgot to put a sandwich. Well, I ran out of bread for my kids' lunches for school. And so I had no lunches for them in school. I mean, I had little snacks. I had to drop them at school, rush to the supermarket. I just grabbed some scrolls. Like, I was like, okay.
I
And
would
then
too.
and then I rushed back and like secret squirrel went into their lunchboxes and like put them in their lunchboxes. So definitely no perfect parent here, but just always having that goal of, help me, Lord, help me in this, and help me to do better. Like I think
Yeah.
it's okay to want to do better. That's okay.
Oh, yeah. I
Um,
think he wants us to. He doesn't save us and then he's like, okay, well, you're great the way you are.
yeah.
Our whole journey is to become more Christ-like.
Mhm.
And that is a refining period. And dang, it's difficult at
Uh-huh.
times,
Yeah.
because you're getting rid of old stuff. You're trying to put new stuff on that. It
Mhm.
just sometimes it's a wrestle, because you're like, oh, I don't want to do it your way, but
Yeah.
I know your way's the best way. Like,
Yeah, that's right. It's like if it's easy, it's like I'm just waiting for the next thing that the Lord's going to start rubbing me on and refining me on, because I have not reached perfection and I never
no,
will until I'm in
no,
glory.
100%.
Oh wow, it's so lovely to talk to you, Deb. Thank you again so much for coming. My mum's name is Deb as well. I don't know if
Oh,
yeah, it's a great name. But just before we sign off, where can mamas listening find and connect with you and your podcast?
you can connect with me on Mama's Mission. So that's Apple, Spotify, those kind of places. And then you can connect with me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Teaching Your Kids About Jesus. And that's a private group. You just answer a few questions. But in that group, we encourage each other to point our kids to Jesus. How do we do this? So I go in every Tuesday and give like a little tip. Teaching tip Tuesday, or Tuesday's teaching tip. I always get it wrong.
Love
But
alliteration, always good.
I know, me too, me too. But I just go in there just for a few minutes and I'll either show you a resource that we're using in our home that's really helpful. I'll share just something that God's placed on my heart, whatever it is. Every Tuesday I'm popping in for a live. But we've got a whole group of women in there and it's awesome. That's our aim. The aim of the game in that group is to point and teach our kids about Jesus.
Amazing. As soon as we finish here, I'm going to be looking that up on Facebook because I didn't know about that group. So I'm
Yeah.
there. And on Teaching Tuesday, I'll be in the comments.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Deb. And hopefully we might have you again on the podcast,
Absolutely.
All right. Signed off. Congrats, you made it to the end of this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. Thanks for the support. Become an official outsider by liking and subscribing and leaving a 5-star review. You can connect with me on Instagram or Facebook. Just search Outside of Sunday podcast, and don't forget to let someone you know about this podcast.